Today I'm going to share about disappointments. And the reason why I'm sharing about this is because I think this is something that all of us need to hear about. And personally for me, the past year has been a bit of a struggle for me. I'll be very frank and very transparent. I was passed over for a promotion last year, and I actually shared with the young adults. But I also know, if I'm very honest with myself, I know that promotion wasn't meant to be for various reasons. But still, as humans, we are affected. We are affected by things that happen around us. So I thought I will go into the Word of God and go and dig into it and see what are the things that bugs us humans, us, even as believers, what bothers us, and how can we deal with disappointment. So if I ask you guys, like a show of hands, how many of you have never been disappointed ever? Anybody? I hope nobody puts up their hands, because if you have never, then you probably want to stand up here and speak. So all of us have, right? And I remember last week I was sharing with the young adults, and I was talking to them about work. And I said, who enjoys your work? And there were a few, actually, thank God for that. There were a few who raised their hands and say, I actually enjoy my work. But when it comes to disappointment, no, everybody has been affected by disappointment. Let's go to the next slide. So what is the definition of disappointment? To be disappointed is to be discouraged or sad because of an unmet expectation regarding someone or something. Right? It's really very simple. Something that you want is unmet. And then you get disappointed. Right? But disappointment in itself is not a sin. And it's not a problem unless you let it fester in you and you let it continue to eat you up. And it then becomes a problem. Alright? Let's go to the next slide. And why is it a problem, right? You see that triangle there. The reasons why we get disappointed is usually twofold. It's either people or circumstances. Right? It's either someone who lets you down, or the circumstances around you that lets you down. So people could be anyone. It could be even your parents, your children, your spouse, your boss, your employee even, right? People is one of the main sources. The circumstances is the next one, and that's self-explanatory. Things can happen, go back to the first one. Things can happen around you, whether it's at workplace or at home, and then you get disappointed. And it is the seed of doubt that comes into you when you first get hit with disappointment. For example, if you are, or in my case, right, I'm expecting or hoping for a promotion, and it never came, right? So the seed of doubt comes into me, and then it eats me up and it says, oh, that job belongs to you, that kind of thing, right? Then your mind started racing, and if you're not careful, you start to blame everybody, and you start to get the joy of being a Christian gets stolen away from you. And then you start to become a miserable Christian, right? You come to church on Sundays, but you're worshiping, but you're still not happy, right? So that's the danger. And sometimes, it's not just a seed of doubt, it's actually a test of your faith. Because God will sometimes allow disappointment to come through your life, because as we saw this morning in the devotional, we've got to work out our faith. And if we are working out our faith, we will be met with things that happen in our life that is going in the wrong direction, right? And that is working out your faith. God gives you a test of your faith. How do you respond to that test? Now, if you continue to let disappointment affect you in a negative way, then it grows into discouragement, and then it grows to disillusionment, and ultimately it can become defeat. And so it affects your walk with God. It affects your relationship with people around you. Even even with my wife, if I let that promotion issue fester in me, I'll be angry all the time at home, right? I'll be like, instead of looking at what I have, I'll be looking at what I do not have, right? So it's a very dangerous thing to allow disappointment to just fester in you and just eat you up. And so you think, if disappointment is something we have to go through, how did the people of God in scriptures deal with them? And they all have, I'll share with you 3 instances. Because if you go back to the Word of God, then you will see that even God's people were faced with disappointments. Let's go to the next slide. So we start with Moses, right? You see, on the left, things in blues are the appointments or the highs of Moses' life, I would say. And then on the things on the right are all the disappointments he faced. So let's go and look at them quickly, one at a time, right? Moses was chosen, right? Even when he was a baby, he was picked, right? God saved him, and then he ended up in Pharaoh's court, right? And not only that, God actually allowed his mother to end up bringing him up, right? So if you were Moses, you'd say, "Oh, that is great, right? God really must have a plan for me, right?" So that is a high on his life. Then he was sent, right? He was sent to bring the people of Israel out of Egypt, to save the people, right? So again, that's another high point. It's almost like a promotion, right? If you look at the normal today's term, it's like, wow, God sent me, Moses, to go out and save the people. He must really feel really high. But actually, to be honest, he didn't want the job, right? If you read about it, he didn't want the job. He was grumbling and he says he couldn't speak and all that. And then in the end, God had to tell him, just go do it, right? I'll give you Aaron, and Aaron will speak on your behalf. So he went. And then he even got to do the 10 plagues. God used him. It was God who obviously made the miracles of the plagues happen so that to force the people, force Pharaoh to let people go. But if you were Moses, how would you feel? It's like, wow, here I am. I'm calling up, calling all these plagues down on these people. He must feel really good. And then he even parted the Red Sea. Well, not him, right? But at least God used him. But then when you look at what's on the right, here are all this disappointment that Moses went through. He was rejected by the Israelites. What happened when he killed one of the Israelites, right? And then in that whole process, he actually had to leave Egypt, right? He went out into the wilderness, and that's when he met his wife, and he ended up becoming a shepherd for a while. And then when God called him, finally he went back to Pharaoh, and God told him, "Go tell Pharaoh, let my people go." Right? But what happened when he went to Pharaoh? God actually hardened Pharaoh's heart, right? And then Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord? Who is the Lord that I should let the people go?" And if you were Moses, you must be thinking, "God, why? You asked me to go do this." And yet, obviously he didn't know the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh. But he must have been disappointed, right? Because he says, "Here I am representing God Almighty." And Pharaoh doesn't even care and doesn't even realize that I'm representing God. So he must have been tough. And then even finally when he ended up in the desert with the Israelites, he ended up with a whole bunch of grumpy, dissatisfied Israelites, right? They were grumbling all the time. And then to make things worse, in the end, he couldn't even go into the promised land, right? So if you were Moses, how would you feel, right? When you read that, if I was Moses, I would probably feel like, wow, this is, after all the work I've done for God, actually it's not so, right? God's just using him. But as a human though, your mind will be saying, this is what I do, God has called me to do, then I kind of deserve something. That's just human nature, right? So all I want to show you is that this is what even God's people go through. And then we go to the next slide, just to see what can be observed from the situation. Again, the disappointment came from two sources. People, the Israelites, Pharaoh, that gave him all the problems, and then the circumstances around him, right? The people they were just wandering in the desert for a while. I'm sure that can't be that fun, right? He thought it was a fitness program, right? 40 years in the desert, right? But then, if you read scriptures, you will realize that even in his frustration, Moses actually went to God. He turned to God. But he actually did sort of say things that almost shows that he was blaming God, because he basically was saying that, God, you brought me out here and then you didn't give me the tools, in a sense, to do what I need to do initially. And then the people got mad with me and Pharaoh got mad with me. And so he was struggling, right? There was a disconnect between what he was told to do and what was happening. But he expressed himself, he expressed his fears to God, which is something we want to learn from that. In other words, if you are in a state where you are disappointed with something, there's nothing wrong for you to tell God what is going on, which was what I did. Later on, I'll show you a snapshot of what happened in the past 12 months plus, where I was actually struggling and talking to God and saying, God, why is this happening? And later on, I understood, and I'll show it to you. Let's go to the next slide. So let's look at King David. What about his situation? He was chosen as well, right? When he was young, he was chosen to be king. Prophet Samuel came to him and told him that he will be anointed king. And then he was given the opportunity to slay Goliath, right? And as a result of that, he sort of moved up the ranks, because King Saul then liked him a lot at that point in time and said, yeah, you come into the court, and becomes one of his commanders in his army. And then ultimately he became king. So those are the great stuff that King David went through. But in the process, he too went through a series of disappointments. Firstly, Saul was so jealous of him that Saul was pursuing him, trying to kill him, right? There was even a story where he was playing the harp, and then Saul took a spear and just threw at him, right? So can you imagine if I was like David in my office and my boss threw the computer at me? Right? How would you feel, right? It actually can happen in your workplace, right? And then he became a fugitive. He ran away from Saul because Saul was pursuing him all the time, right? And so he too had a problem with disconnect between the promises that Samuel told him that he was going to be king, and yet he was being tormented by King Saul. And then one of his covenant partners, Jonathan, son of Saul, even met with death. And when all hell broke loose, he actually ended up living with the Philistines, which are really the enemies, but he actually ended up living with them because that was the only place he knew or he thought that Saul would not pursue him. So if you think about it, David went through a lot as well, even though, right, he was supposed to be, the prophecy was spoken to him that he would become king, but it didn't all happen at once. Let's go to the next slide and look at what are some observations for David's situation. God's way are not necessarily our way, right? So if you look at David's situation, he thought that he was going to be king and probably didn't think he had to go through all those pains before he would become king. And I'm sure if he was in the midst of the points where he was struggling with Saul, he probably didn't even believe he would become king. But the truth is, it is at that point in time, number two, the most important time for your faith to be strong or to be proven is when you are disappointed. In other words, if you are in a situation where you're confused, you believe you should be going in a certain direction because you've been doing everything you think is right in your mind. And we've been teaching about obedience, teaching about tithe, teaching about everything that has to do with God's will for us, and we believe that God's perfect will for us is to give us prosperity and good life. But something happens in this process, and you say, I don't see it, I'm doing all this thing, I don't see it. That is the time when you have to really stand firm in your faith and say, I'm going to continue to trust God. And that was what David did. Psalms 18, he wrote, I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock, in whom I take refuge. He is my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I call to the Lord, who is worthy of praise, and I am safe from my enemies. So David was, as opposed to Moses, which I will show you later on, David at least acknowledged that God is his strength. I think we sang one of the songs probably a few weeks ago about, Lord, I look to you. You're where my help come from, right? That song. That is actually from this verse. So that's David. What about the New Testament disciples? Let's look at the next slide. The disciples. Again, if you were the disciples those days, they were called by Jesus, right? They were kind of like fishermen and almost like nobodies in the regular sense of life. But then you see Jesus calls them, and then they drop everything and they just went ahead and do what Jesus called them to do. And if you were them, you probably would feel, wow, I'm chosen by Jesus. This is good. And Jesus has a plan to save the world. Although at that point in time, obviously, they don't know what that plan was. You must feel pretty good about yourself, right? You follow Jesus, you go around, and Jesus did all the miracles, and you get to witness the miracles firsthand. You must feel pretty good about it. But then what happened was subsequently, when Jesus had to go to the cross and die, can you imagine how they felt when that happened? In fact, they spoke about it, right? I mean, Peter himself was trying to prevent that from happening. He didn't believe that Jesus had to die, right? He even took out his sword and tried to defend Jesus. So that must have been devastating for them to see that Jesus had to go through the pain of the cross. And then, to make matters worse, they see Jesus being buried, right? So if you look at the point in time where you are the apostles and looking at Jesus being buried, how do you feel at what point in time, right? What is the level of disappointment as to what you had thought was going to happen and what you are seeing with your own eyes as to what's happening? And in fact, even after Jesus rose from the dead and Jesus appeared before them and then told them to go to preach the gospel. Again, if you look at that point in time when Jesus says, go, I'm sure at that point in time the apostles says, wow, I actually saw Jesus rose from the dead. Jesus is really God. I'm called by Jesus to go out and preach the gospel. It must feel really good, right? It's like another promotion, right? Here I am working for King of Kings, someone who rose from the dead. But if you read what happens, like in terms of records of what happened to the apostles, I think only John was the only one that wasn't martyred or spared. Yeah, he was the only one that died a natural death. All the other 11 were martyrs. So if you were one of the 11, how would you feel at the point before you were martyred, right? So these are all examples of how even as Christians, we will be put to the test, not to the extent of what we see in the apostles' life, but yes, there will be points in our life where we think or we expect something to happen, but it doesn't happen, right? Because we want God to work according to our plans, right? We all have plans, and we say we want this to happen, we want that to happen, and that's exactly what happened to me, right? I've been in Hong Kong now, coming to 7 years. In 2 months, I'll be exactly 7 years. And a year ago, after doing all the stuff I did for the company, I almost thought that it should be almost like a natural process. But when it didn't happen, I felt like these people, but not as bad, obviously, not to the extent of death, right? It's like just a different kind of work, right? But still, as humans, it affects you. Let's go to the next slide and see what then is really the big picture. And in the case of the apostles, Jesus told them in Luke 24:25, you read that Jesus said, "How foolish are you, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken? Did not the Christ have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them that was said in all scriptures concerning himself. And it's interesting that here he actually says beginning from Moses, because later on I'll show you why Moses wasn't allowed to go into the promised land. It has something to do with this verse here. So the big picture is that there's always something that has nothing to do really with us. It really has to do with Jesus and the gospel and God. Because whatever circumstances you are in, whether if you see it in Moses' time, or you see it in David, or you see it in the apostles' time, everything points toward God actually. Right? Every situation that they are in, they were only instruments to be used by God for God's objective. It has never been about them. It has never been about Moses or David or even about the apostles. It's always about Jesus. Right? So if you understand that whatever circumstances you're in is never about you, then it helps you to understand and not sort of let disappointment eat you up. Right? So let's look at how we can prevent a situation where you are going from disappointment to a point of defeat. Right? Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to point out 7 very quick points. The first, obviously, is to keep your mind focused on the Lord. If you keep your mind focused on the Lord, then you're focusing on the right thing. You're not focusing on your situation. You're not focusing on why you never got promoted, or why you wanted this thing to happen and it didn't happen, or you want to marry this person but it's not a Christian, that kind of thing, right? It's anything that you don't get when you want it is a disappointment. But if you focus on God and you trust God that He will deliver you and He will provide the best for you, then you basically can break that spirit of disappointment in you to prevent yourself snowballing into the next stage. Proverbs 3:5-8 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your path straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones." Which is so true, right? bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. You know that people who end up in suicidal situation, it's the mind, right? Your health. If you dwell on the disappointment and let it fester and let it snowball into something that becomes crippling to your mind, that's how the enemy gets to you. And when you lose your mind, that's where suddenly life doesn't matter anymore. Which is the opposite of what God says, right? Life is what it's all about. God's here to save us, right? But that's the enemy's work, right? Which is why it's important to focus on God and not focus on the situation. The second thing is to always have a thanksgiving attitude, no matter what circumstances you're in. There will always be something in your life that you can be thankful for, right? Yes. You can either look at what you can be thankful for, or you can look at the disappointment and just be unhappy, right? You can be thankful for your kids, for your job, even that you're alive. You know, we hear about situations. I mean, I know Hong Kong is not an easy place to live, it's expensive. But if you compare that to, I'm sure there's somewhere in the world that's even worse than Hong Kong, right? In terms of size of apartment, or maybe like worms in the washrooms, right? There's always some things that you can be thankful for, and if you focus on the things that you're thankful for, then you take your mind off the disappointment. I remember even that period when I was struggling with being passed on for promotion. All I had to do was look at Pat, right? Look at her. I see her. She's so fervent in her Bible study, and look at my kids. All I can say is thank you, Lord. You know, even if I don't have the promotion, so what? I look at what I have, and I can be 100% sure I'm thankful. I'm 100% sure I'm thankful. I'm even in Calvary Church, right? For the love that the people in Calvary Church gave to us over these 6+ years. And that helped me look away and all that and say, those are not important things in life. Thanksgiving is very important. To always be thankful for what the Lord has given to us. Number 3, willing to be vulnerable before God. And I think this is very important. Like I said to you, when I was struggling with God on my situation, I asked God exactly this question. Don't get stuck in a situation where you are angry and you are upset, and you either you speak to someone who may not be sympathetic to you, or someone who cannot really help you because maybe they themselves are disappointed with something else, right? So you kind of share the disappointment and you just create a bigger problem for the two of you, right? But if you go to the Lord and you ask the Lord, why? Why is this happening? And I tell you, if you are honest, if you ask God, He will show you. Because I'll tell you what happened to me when I was asking the Lord. In fact, I'll tell you right now, because I might lose my train of thought. When I was struggling with that, I knew I had good pay, but I was at a point where I was so focused on being passed out on promotion. I was prepared to give up my job and give up my pay. It was that bad, right? But then I asked the Lord, I said, why am I feeling that way? It's a lot of money that I'm giving up. And I couldn't understand, right? Because I said, a normal person would say, don't give up, just put up with the new change management, the new people you're working with. Just put up with them, because you're giving up a lot of money. But every time I made the decision to stay, my spirit was very, very disturbed. And I asked the Lord, why? I said, why is it that I'm so disturbed by the spirit of just not content with what it is, notwithstanding the amount of money I see in front of me, right? And initially I didn't have an answer. It was during the prayer, what is it? I fast, I pray. That week when we were doing the full 1 week every night, Pastor Raymond said in one of his prayer, he had a word from the Lord saying, some of us here are comfortable but very discontent. Comfortable but discontented. I was very comfortable. I had everything I needed. But I was just discontented with what was going on around me. And the minute I made a decision to give up the money and give up the job, it was as though a spirit just left me. I felt so much at peace. And when Pastor Raymond said that word, comfortable but discontented, you have to move, that just spoke to me right away. So the point I'm trying to make is when you are struggling with disappointment, there's nothing wrong for you to go be vulnerable with the Lord and ask those questions. The Lord will answer you. You're honest with Him. But obviously, if you are after something and you just want that thing no matter what, then you will shut out the voice of God. Right? If you shut out the voice of God, then you will be doing just what you want to do rather than hearing God and say, okay, I will hear you and I will do what you want me to do. The next slide. Sufficiency in Christ. 2 Corinthians, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then I'm content. With weakness, with insult, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I'm weak, then I'm strong. You see, he said, I am content with weakness, with hardship, persecution. Now, I'm not even going through any of this, but I was still discontent. But this verse tells you that if you are discontented, then Christ is sufficient for you. Right? Again, you see that scriptures are always pointing you back to Christ. It's never pointing you to a solution that you want or you expect. Because that solution you're looking for may not come. Right? Because our mind is always clouded by what we want rather than what God wants for us. Right? So if I look at my situation, I don't know what God wants for us back in Toronto. I don't know. But the fact that God has moved us in that manner, I know that He has a different plan for us. And we have to hear that voice and we have to move according to that voice. We cannot hold on to what we expect and want. Because then you will always be disappointed. And then further on in Isaiah 40:31, it says, but those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up on wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. They shall run and not be weary. I tell you, I felt so weary when I tell myself to just stay and work with the company. And mind you, the young people know, I shared with them last week. When the change management came actually happened in September, October of 2017. Change management came and the new management was shutting out all the projects that I was doing because the person who was new obviously wanted to prove himself, right? So he was taking all the projects for himself. Anything that I brought to the table, he shut it down, right? So I found myself in a position where nothing I did mattered because he was the boss. He just shut everything down, right? So I reached a point where, and the beauty of it all is, in the beginning of 2017, the company actually allowed me to work from home. So I worked from home, and by the time September of 2017 came, we did one deal, and then when January of 2018 came, I literally had no work to do. I'm paid a lot of money, I got no work, I'm sitting at home. The first month I tried to create work, right? Because I felt like guilty, right? You get paid and you don't have enough work to do. So I tried to create work, but then I realized that he kept shutting my work down, right? To the point where I said, oh, what's the point, right? So I told the Lord, I can't do this anymore. I can't stay at home and literally had not much to do. And then that was the time Pat started doing the precept upon precept. So she was actually working harder than me. She was working like 12 hours preparing for the precept ministry. I was working 8 hours watching TV. And there wasn't even anything to watch on TV, like programs are so bad. So I ended up doing the washings in the house. I ended up doing the cooking because somebody has to do it. But then I knew at that point in time, even though I wasn't doing anything like making money or anything for the company, I was actually at so much peace. I had so much peace with what was happening because I knew that was God preparing us for something different. Right? That's why going back to being vulnerable with God is very important. You need to talk to God about anything that you're not happy with. Right? Because when you're weak, God will give you the strength. Right? The verses are there. It tells you, and you know, I'm so glad that my wife did the precept ministry, and a lot of those of us who are on that course, we recognize that too. Because when you actually go to the Word of God, all the answers to all your problems are found in the Word of God. There's nothing that you cannot find. Okay, the next slide. God is in control. Obviously, right? God is in control. Isaiah 55, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, my thoughts, your thoughts. And further on, Genesis says, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is being done, the saving of many lives. Now, that verse, saving of many lives, again speaks to Jesus, right? Jesus' purpose was to save lives. He came for a reason, and that sort of speaks to when God wants something to be done, even if it means that Jesus had to go to the cross, it will be done, right? And similarly in our lives, if God has something for us that is good, that He wants us to do, even if at that point in time it doesn't seem like it's good, you just have to trust God and know that God is in control, right? And I'll show you later on. I sort of plotted the whole almost 12 years that pre us coming to Hong Kong and the whole 7 years that we are here. And when I plotted that, it was mainly to show, to compare with what happens to like Moses and people like David, right? Because if you look at the Bible is actually doing the same thing. If you read the Bible is showing people's life, like a snapshot, like a movie reel, right? At a certain point in time, you don't know what happens at the later stage of your life. At the point when you're struggling, you don't know what God's going to do at the later stage. But if you have gone past that stage, and you look at the whole script, then you suddenly realize that God's fingerprints are all over it, right? And that's where, if you do that, I encourage you, if you have, blessings in your lives, and different, even struggles in your life, plot for yourself, the series of events that God has done for you. And you may be surprised by what God actually has done in your life, has blessed you. And even the points in your life where you find that it was a struggle, you will then begin to see why it's happened. Which is the same thing as what I will show you as to Moses in the short while. Okay, next slide. In your disappointment, don't break faith with God. This is very important because if you're a new believer and then you accepted Christ, and then something happens to your life. You'll be 2 months, 3 months down. If you break faith with God, then you will not receive His blessings. You won't see the outcome of what's going on in your life, right? In other words, if you break faith too early in your initial sanctification process in life, you may not fully understand what God is doing in your life. But if you keep at it and hold on to His promises, because you've heard all the promises from Pastor John and all the preachers, right? It's always God's promises are yes and amen for you. And all the, God's always got good plans for us. But if you break faith, how can you receive those promises? Right? And then we can go back to Moses, right? Let me ask you guys, right? When we spoke about Moses and all the things that Moses did, how many of you feel like maybe God was too harsh on Moses? Does anybody feel that way? Yeah? Put show of hands. Who think God is too harsh on Moses after all He's done? Yeah, I see that there's at least a quarter of you that think God was too harsh on Moses. The rest of you think Moses deserved it? No, I'm sure you don't think so. Because I asked myself that question too. I said, wow, he did all these things. In fact, God told him to do it, and he didn't want to do it. And God almost forced him to do it, right? And yet, after all that is said and done, God says, you're not going to the promised land, right? It's like, what? Not fair, God. Okay, let me read this to you, right? Verse 51, Deuteronomy, says, because you broke faith with me in the midst of the people of Israel, at the waters of Meribah Kadesh, in the wilderness of Zin, and because you did not treat me as holy in the midst of the people of Israel, for you shall see the land before you, but you shall not go there. Because you broke faith, you did not treat me as holy. So you must be wondering, what did he do that caused the Lord to say that? So what happened was, they were nearing their 40 years of wandering in the desert, doing their fitness program, right? And then they had no water. And they started complaining to Moses and Aaron. In fact, this was not the only time they complained, right? They complained about everything, right? Even when God sent them manna, sent them the quails, they complained of everything, right? I think it's kind of like us, right? We complain about everything too, right? But we just don't know that. But when you see this, you see, we are not any better, right? We complain about everything. We can get away with it, right? So they were complaining. And Moses got so mad with them, right? Which was why I said earlier on, Moses kind of said, why did you give me this bunch of babies, right? They just kept complaining. But he got so mad that he said to them, he says, listen, you rebels, must we bring you water out of this rock? This was what Moses said. Listen, you rebels, must we bring water out of this rock? So by saying, must we bring, who is the we? Is Moses and Aaron, because he is talking to the people of Israel, right? So he says, must we, me, Moses, and Aaron, bring water out of this rock? What he just did was took credit for himself, right? It is God that brought water out of the rock. It is God that parted the Red Sea. It is God that did everything. But Moses, when he was so mad, he says, must we? Right? So that was one thing he did wrong. He took credit for himself for what was about to happen, which was the miracle that God was going to do. And then he got so mad, he struck the rock twice. Right? If you read that, it says he struck the rock twice with his staff. That's Numbers 20, 10 to 11. And then water came out of the rock, as God had promised. But God immediately told Moses and Aaron that because they failed to trust him enough to honor him as holy, they would not bring the children of Israel into the promised land. And that was because God told Moses to speak to the rock. He didn't ask Moses to strike the rock. Right? So that tells you obedience is very important. Right? We spoke about tithing, we spoke about so many other things, right? About not marrying, non-believers, that kind of thing. It's all about obedience. It's such a simple thing that God told Moses. And he missed it, right? Because out of anger, he missed it. Now, what about us? When we are angry with our situations, in our workplace, with our bosses, do we forget and we do things that we're not supposed to do? Right? I'm sure we do that, right? We may curse, we may, I don't know, your boss wasn't very nice to you when you're frying your vegetable. I remember in the old days in the army, right, they say, don't ever get into the wrong side of the cooks. They'll put the coffee in the socks and then they'll make coffee for you. Right? So that is like doing something that you're not supposed to do because you're angry, right? So that was what happened to Moses, right? He basically got so mad he struck the rock. Now then you may say that, what's the big deal about him striking the rock? Okay. Now let me show you why it was a big deal. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, this one spoke about him taking credit for himself. Must we bring water out of the rock? And then he struck the rock. Okay, go to the next slide. Good. So here is where it's interesting. Water-giving rock, that's the rock we're talking about. It's a symbol of Christ. So in 1 Corinthians 10, it says, and drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank from the spiritual rock that accompanied them. And that rock was Christ. So the rock actually signified Jesus Christ. Right? So when God says, speak to the rock, it actually can be looked at as being, in the today's situation, it's like speaking to the rock. Rock. If you remember, the rock is Christ, and it's like prayer. You're praying to God. You're not thumping your tables and say, God, why is this not happening? Right? You're praying. And then you look at the next line. It says, the rock was struck once already in Exodus 17:6, which signifies Jesus being crucified once. Right? Because in Hebrews it says, unlike the other priests, we were studying this in covenant class over the past 11 weeks. Unlike the other high priests, he did not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people. He sacrificed for the sins once for all when he offered himself. Right? Once for all. So when in Exodus 17:6, God did tell Moses to strike the rock once. And water came out. So that was actually God telling him, strike the rock once. It was actually a typology of what was to come. Right? So, which is why I said, even in Moses' time, even in Exodus, God already spoke. It was almost like a prophecy to say, Christ is coming. He will die once for the sins of the people. But when Moses did not listen to God, he struck the rock twice. It's almost like crucifying Christ twice. Right? And he did that in front of the Israelites, in front of all the people, because God told him to gather the people, speak to the rock, but he struck the rock in his anger. So God had to deal with his disobedience, which is why he wasn't allowed to enter the promised land. But God still loved him. Right? God still loved him. You see, the thing about our walk with God is that whenever we sin or we disobey God, there is a consequence to what our actions are. If we disobey God in whatever form, I mean, when you look at what's written here, right, it seems so mundane, right, striking the rock twice, but God looked at it very seriously because there are some consequences, and the consequences has to follow. I'm going to run through very quickly the next few slides because I realize the time is catching up. The next slide. In contrast with Moses, David, even though he sinned, he did not break faith with God. Right? But he went through a lot of consequences for his sins. Right? If you read the whole story about David, after Bathsheba, he had all the problems with his son, his covenant partner Jonathan died. He was even given the option. God told him Israel would have to be punished because of his sin. And you have to realize that the consequences of sins are actually not really punishment, there's just a consequence. In other words, if you do something wrong, it follows, right? It's like someone saying, okay, if someone sleep with someone, out of wedlock and then conceive, that's a consequence of sin, right? You can't stop the process. It's going to happen. You can be forgiven for what you've done. You go to the Lord, you ask for forgiveness. You'll be forgiven, but the consequences follow. And sometimes consequences are not necessarily bad because they are actually corrective discipline from God. Right? God is trying to correct you if you have not been obedient. Go to the next slide. But the difference again between Moses and David is that he acknowledged his guilt. Right? He says in Psalms 51, he says, against you, only you only have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight. So you are right in your verdict and justified when you judge. In other words, consequences of sins has to go through, but David admitted he was wrong. He was guilty. Okay, let's go to the next slide. The other thing to remember is, there's a lot of scriptural verses about worship. And if you are in a situation where you are disappointed with situations, worship the Lord at all times. For me, it's a lot easier because I love to worship. So, because I play the guitar, it's easy whenever I'm struggling with something. I either listen to worship music or I play the guitar. For you guys, if you're not musicians, listen to worship songs. I was going to do a song later on, but I don't have the time, so we'll skip it. But okay, let's go to the next slide. You'll see why worship is important. You look at this. Samuel. But when David saw that his servants were whispering together, David understood that the child was dead. This child was the child from the Bathsheba, that's right. Right? So David still loved that child, but because of the consequences of sin, God basically said that child has to die. Right? And for God, there's no excuse. God said that it's going to happen. So even though David pleaded to the Lord to say, let the child live, the child died, right? So he says that they were whispering. Then David said to the servants, is the child dead? And they said, he is dead. David arose from the earth, washed, anointed himself, changed his clothes, and he went into the house of the Lord and he worshipped. He didn't complain. He didn't say, God, I beg of you to save this child. He just accepted consequences, says you worship. And that's the way we should deal with our disappointments too. If you are struggling with something, worship is the best place to be in, to spend time with God. The next slide. Again on worship. Psalms 34. I will praise the Lord no matter what happens. I will constantly speak of His glories and grace. I will boast of all his kindness to me. Let all who are discouraged take heart. Let us praise the Lord together and exalt his name. For I cried to him, and he answered me. He freed me from all my fears. You see, worship is paramount in our walk with God. If you worship the Lord, he helps to take away all those distractions from disappointments. Next slide. Summing it up, again, disappointment comes from either people, circumstances. If you put your trust in these two, you will always be disappointed, no matter what. Right? Even if it's your spouse, even if it's your parents, there will always be something even in someone closest to you that will still disappoint you. But if you put your trust in God, then he has promised to see you through. Right? Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. This is a verse that I hung on to many, many times. In the days when I was struggling with work, I always go back to this verse, and it's brought me through. Next slide. I'm going to share a quick testimony on, like I was telling you about the period before I came to Hong Kong, the 7 years that we were in Hong Kong. And you will see in that slide, there are points where I was disappointed with situations, circumstances again. Circumstances or people disappointed me. But if I look at what God has done after that, you will see that God has a plan. Now, I show this not because to say, hey, God has been good to me. Testimonies are given to give thanks to the Lord. Call upon his name to make known to his people the deeds among the people. In other words, I'm sharing with you so that you know God is really good. Our God is a good God. He will look after us. Okay, next slide. So this is what I plotted. You see the red, there's only 3 red dots, which means my mind isn't that bad actually, because those are the disappointments in the past 12 years, right? The greens are the situations personal to me and Pat. The blues are things that happen in my office. So if you look from 2007, when the global financial crisis happened, interestingly enough, that was the year before I was actually told I was coming to Hong Kong. And I was in Hong Kong in a hotel, and Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, and the whole world changed. And at that time, in September, I was watching CNN. By December, my company told me, you're not going to Hong Kong anymore. So that was my first disappointment. I was like, wow, I was so looking forward to it, right? But if you look at down the road, because the market crashed, we bought a house in 2009. In 2011, one of our church, youth pastor, asked me to go to Uganda with him. And I reluctantly went. And that actually was the time when I actually learned so much. And whatever I've been doing here in the past 6 years at Calvary, it was actually out of that Uganda mission. Because it was in that Uganda mission that God taught me a lot of things. And during that Uganda mission, just after the missions, I tried to, some of you must have heard the story, I tried to raise funds to put in a water harvesting system in one of the small cities in Uganda. It was like, I was so into it, I wanted to do it, but I wanted to take credit for myself. Right? It's a human nature, you want to take credit for things you do, even though you're thinking you're doing for God. So I was trying to raise money, and I was so impatient about raising money from the church, I decided to basically bought shares in the stock market, thinking that there was this one share that I thought it was 100%, but I actually lost so much money. I almost walked away from God. Remember we talked about when you break faith with God, you will never see what God was going to do for you. Thank God for me, my wife told me, what you do today, she says, is going to determine what's going to happen to you in the next few years. And I had to acknowledge that, I almost walked away from God. Because in my mind, I said, God, I'm trying to do this thing for you, right? Thinking that I'm the one doing it, but actually it's not so, right? Obviously. God is trying to give me the chance to be used, but I got ahead of God and says, if you can't bring in the money soon enough, I'm going to go and find the money myself. And I lost so much money, I said, I wasn't going to do it. But then I turned around and said, okay, I'm going to trust God. At that time, we were already tithing, mind you. We were tithing. And I even said to myself, why am I tithing anymore? If I just lost so much money, right? Why am I tithing? And Pat says, you better continue tithing. I said, maybe you should stop shopping. She says, no, I'm going to come to the shop. She says to me, she says, life is as per normal. She says, nothing has changed because I trust God. She told me that, right? So I said, okay, I'll do it. Right? Actually, I was more afraid of the pastors calling me up and saying, why have you stopped coming to church? So I continued, right? And that was when things changed, right? When I admitted, just like David, right? I admitted I was wrong because I tried to do this on my own. Then God turned things around. Then, immediately after that, 2012, we came to Hong Kong. The company gave us the relocation. And just before that, completed the water project. And then if you look down, everything else is green. Right? That was when, by the time 2017, if you look at the second row of the film strip, 2017 September was when the change management came. And that was when, if I look at all the green, I tell myself, yeah, I should be the one that's promoted. Right? Humanly, that's what I say, right? But now I know God says no. God says it's time to do something else. And that was why, amazingly enough, 2018, after that whole situation where the new management came, 2018 all the way, whole year, we managed to pay off our debts by September. And we can see, literally, God is preparing us. By September, we owe nobody a penny. And that is after I lost all that money in 2011. Right? But God restored and give us back even more. And that was the whole of last year, 2018, was, like I said earlier on, I had literally no work to do. God was already preparing me to unwind, to not do anything. But then God was preparing Pat to do the precept ministry. And she was very involved in precept, and she introduced precept to the church, and we see what precept is doing for the church. And so we know that there's a purpose for this to happen. And right now, I'm actually just waiting for the company to tell me whether they're going to give me a package to retire early, or they'll give me a job back in Toronto. The beauty of it all is, in Canada, and again, I believe this is only God that can do it, because the timing couldn't be more perfect. My contract with the company is that if they bring me back to Canada, they have to give me a job. They can't just fire me without giving me severance. And because I have worked with the company for 29 years, my severance will be so huge. I can literally probably not work for 2 years. And then the even greater beauty of this, which is why I was hoping that God will give me the answer this week, because I've been waiting for a while. But I know it's God's timing. Right? I was hoping that God will give me an answer, because I can say, hey, God, I can share with the people how good you are. But I know the fact that He's not giving me the answer means He has something else happening. Right? I just have to trust Him and wait on Him. And so that's the story of how great our God is, and how amazing it is if you just put your faith and trust in God. And remember that everything you see here is not about me, it's about God. So let's go to the next slide. Because if it's about me, then it becomes pride. Right? Like I said earlier on with Moses, right? If we give ourselves credit for the things God has accomplished in our lives, then we are taking the glory that belongs to God. And that's a dangerous position to be in, which was exactly what happened to Moses, right? You don't want to be in that position. And plus, it's so clear, the Bible says, promotion comes from God. He's the one who judges. He brings one down, he exalts another. Right? So, notwithstanding what has happened in the past 12 months, the fact that I went through the Bible and tried to understand what's going on in my life, which I encourage you guys to do. If you're ever in situations where you are struggling with something, go read the Bible. The answers are out there. If you don't read the Bible, then you make up situations for yourself, and you make up excuses for yourself, and make up solutions for yourself, and you'll not get anywhere. Right? But if you read the Bible, then even if the answers are not what you expect, because it doesn't go your way, you know it's from God, right? And you just have to accept it. I think that's the end of it. Is there another slide? Oh, okay. So although I originally said that the root cause of problems with disappointment is people and circumstances, but in reality, if you read the Word of God, the root causes are actually we don't trust that God is for us. Right? We don't depend on Him as our rock. We stand in judgment of others. In other words, if I don't get what I want, I blame the other person, I blame my boss, I blame anything but me. Right? We get frustrated, we get impatient, and then we resent that God's grace is given to someone else. Right? So if someone else gets promoted and you don't, you sneer at that person, or you don't have the person, or you don't, in my situation, I shared with the young adults. When I knew this new boss came to my office, and again, it's because we understand God's word. There's a verse that says, respect the emperor and honor God, which was what David did with Saul, right? David had two opportunities to kill Saul because Saul was pursuing him, but David didn't even touch Saul physically, right? He had the position, but he didn't. Why? Because he knew he could not touch God's anointed one, right? In the same way, if your boss, your authority, anyone that God puts above you as an authority is authority from God. You have to give the respect, even if that person is a nutcase or a really nasty guy. You have to respect that person. So in my situation, when I knew that was happening, I actually took upon myself to share everything I knew about the company with this person. I could have just sat around and not give him anything and just what's the term you use? Passive aggressive. In other words, your aggressive attitude is just by doing nothing. Right? Because if you do nothing, the poor guy has to figure out things on his own. But I took upon myself to tell the guy everything. And that's because I want to honor God. Right? So at the end of it all is just trust God. Trust in His goodness.